Go for it.
Everyone, thank you very much for joining us. I've got with me Dr. Kevin Subin, and he will introduce himself just now. Just to kind of put all of this a bit in perspective, I've been coaching for quite a while, and in recent times around Pietermaritzburg, a lot of the older guys have had issues around their hearts, and so I have read up and studied the subject quite a bit in the last couple of weeks. So I thought it would be good just to kind of share what I found with you, and ask Dr. Kevin Subin to join us to give us the medical part of my discussion, and everyone can't just think that you want to suck things out of his thumb as we go. So Kevin, can I ask you to introduce yourself to everyone, and then we'll carry on with the presentation.
Yeah. Thank you, Johan. I'm sure everybody can hear me. Thank you, Johan, for inviting me to this platform. It's really a good thing. I'm a sports physician based in Durban at Prime Human Performance Institute. I've been involved with our national teams in the form of All Africa Games, Commonwealth Games, Olympic Games, and Paralympic Games for over 20 years, dealing with multi-coded events, and specifically cycling, by the way. Cycling in particular in the road, BMX, and mountain biking, and also in Paralympic cycling. We just came back from Tokyo now with a gold medal, with Peter winning the gold medal there. So yeah, I'm based in Prime in Durban, and I look after a lot of athletes at the elite level, all the way down to the person that's just want to cycle and just to keep fit. So I'm working with all of these athletes. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. So just to quickly share with you what we're going to talk about tonight. I think the first question, that I've realized is, who is a midlife cyclist, and has anyone done this before? So I'm going to just touch on that. Then we're going to talk about aging and exercise, the bit of information we know, and I'm sure Dr. Subin will join us there. We're going to ask the question, how much exercise is good for me? And yes, gents, it's all about the heart. So we're going to talk about all those heart conditions we hear about. We're going to talk about managing the risk a bit, and then touch on how to do it better and have a conclusion. So my aim is to be done in 30 minutes, 35 minutes or so. So we don't want to keep you too long. So the first question we ask is, who is this, and has it been done before? So for us, or for me specifically, the definition of a midlife cyclist is someone of 50 and older and who ride regularly. So I just want to ask everyone to mute their Zoom, please. I just want to start with this bit here. In the 1900s, the life expectancy on a world average was 31 to 32 years old. So just think about this. So if you were born in 1870, if you went past 1900, you were doing well. In 1950, the life expectancy was 45 to 48. So again, if you were born in the 1900s, if you went past 48, you were doing well. Right now, our life expectancy is between 72 and 74. And I want to put this in perspective in terms of what we're trying to do as midlife cyclists. We are the first generation that is pushing our bodies to do what we're doing. Our parents, if you've got a parent that ever pushed their bodies to do what we're doing right now, that will be quite unique. It just didn't happen. So, we are kind of pioneers, and there's not a lot of science to fall back on to really understand what a true impact is for pushing our bodies like we do at this stage of our lives. so we can't stop the years clicking by, but we can definitely try our best to slow down the genetic clock, and by being a bit more structured in terms of what we doing, what we love. So, and this is something that every bit of communication I read, this is it. There's no drug or medical intervention that has ever been devised that can benefit us as much as simple movement at any age. So even if doing what we're doing is going to hurt us, I want to start off by saying the benefit, the upside is probably better than the downside. There's just, it's, being able to do exercise at older age stops so many diseases. It keeps your mind active. It's a very good thing. I think the issue is just understanding what the risks are and managing those. So I'm not going to talk about this too long, but as we age, we lose muscle fiber, and it's called sarcopenia. So I've learned some big words in this presentation as well. And it affects the type 2 or the fast twitch muscle fiber more than the endurance-based muscle fiber. And you can see as you get older, your endurance improves or doesn't deteriorate nearly as fast as your sprinting will do. So you can't regrow muscle fiber. When it dies, it dies. So what we need to do is we need to understand that for the fast twitch muscle fiber or the type 2 muscle fiber, we need to preserve what is left. So we need to do resistance training or weight training to be able to kind of sustain those type 2 muscle fibers. So it's important that we take that away as a first takeaway. Just riding your bike is not going to be good for you in the long term. You need to do some work to keep on developing the type 2 muscle fiber as well.
But after to go and turn the stuff up on the wall with my steamer.
I just want to mute this person here. Okay, so, and then of course, as men and women age, testosterone and estrogen are reduced. For men, it's a big problem in terms of performance. And gents, before you start thinking naughty things, this is just in terms of riding your bike and doing physical exercise, it's the issue. For women, it's also an issue, but not exactly in the same way as is for men. And this is quite an interesting finding in terms of what's the difference between men and women as we get older. All right, so there's been a lot of studies done in terms of how much, whether exercise is good for you. And most studies find that between 2 and 5 hours a week of moderate exercise is good for you. And if it's vigorous, you need to do a bit less than 2 to 5 hours a week. I know there's a lot of people who are leaving to go and do the double Molito this weekend, which is a 180-kilometer road race. And a lot of the guys going there, guys and ladies, are way past 50 years old. So, that what is the right amount of exercise is definitely not going to be enough for us for the events we aspire to. So, we understand that. So, what happens when we do more than 2 to 5 hours? So, I need to emphasize this, and I think Dr. Subin will speak a lot more about it just now. This is based on people who do not have genetic or adverse lifestyle issues. But I know Dr. Subin has shared with me this morning about some study they've had where we see that I think people don't always understand their genetics and lifestyle issues. Can I just ask that person to mute their Zoom? I'll mute you then. Thank you. Okay, so long and short is it, if we go more than 2 to 5 hours a week, women just get fitter. And I know ladies, you are going to love this. And men has a 15% chance of developing some cardiac issue, which is I'm 54, which is not a nice thing to read. So it's about understanding the risks involved here. Is this a big issue? A study that I've done in the UK using the right London data, which is kind of like the Cape Town cycle tour, has shown there's a fatal cardiac event every 5 million kilometers pedaled, or you have a 1 in 36,000 chance of dying because of your heart if you take part in the event. And they've never recorded a lady having a heart issue, a cardiac event, whilst taking part in this event. So, ladies, if you want to leave the discussion from this point forward, you're welcome to, because as you see, you guys it's not as affected by doing the long stuff as the gentleman. So I'm going to get Kevin, I'm going to open up all of these, and maybe you can talk through these things, because I'll leave this over to Dr. Subin to discuss this a bit more in terms of what actually happens and how it affects the heart. Kevin, you happy with that?
Yeah. Thanks, Johan. I'll go through this. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, you want me to start now?
Yeah, just go for it.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Johan. And can you bring me on with the? I sent you my slides.
Okay,
right?
let me just.
Can you share the slides? Good evening, people. Thank you for Johan to invite me to this forum. I think it's very essential, and it's very important. I think it's when it comes to cycling or exercise in particular. Yeah, there we go. Thanks, Johan. I think it's important that we understand where we at, how much we can do, and where we or how much we. Sorry, Johan, I can't. Okay, you can change it. Okay, you can change it on your side, sir.
Yeah. Just tell me when to change.
Okay, change it. Yeah. Now it's the same. It's the same topic that we're having with Johan and I. Midlife cycling, is it good for you? I mean, it's probably a rhetorical question. All right. Next slide, please. I mean, it's certainly a rhetorical question, and science has proven that. Can you go on with the slides?
Yeah. You want to go there?
Yeah, Johan, it's not. It doesn't come through. I suggest you stop sharing and just go into it again.
Thanks, Charles.
Okay, I lost that.
Can you see it now?
There we go. Yeah. Okay, okay, there we go.
Just start there.
Yeah, now go up one more.
Back.
Okay, yeah. Now, as I said, this was a rhetorical question, people. I mean, there's no question that cycling or exercise in general is good for all of us. I mean, I put that. I mean, and I think Johan has put that question there. The question is how much, and what we need to check. Next slide, please. Now, I'm going back to a study that was done by colleagues of mine, Martin Schwellnus, Christa Jansi van Rensburg. Now, this was in 2016 at the 2016 Cape Town Cycle Tour, where they looked at look at leisure cyclists at risk of medical complications, and they looked at looking at the masters who are seasoned cyclists and leisure cyclists participating to moderate and high intensity, and to identify any high-risk athletes who should undergo a medical assessment. Next slide, please. Okay, I mean, that's a big number if you're looking at 22,000. The staggering statistic was that 35% of those that were interviewed via a poll required a full medical assessment prior to participation. Now, this is quite a significant statistic if you're looking at the I wouldn't call it the elderly, I would call it over 50. Of this, 25% presented with the risk of coronary vascular disease, right? 4% reported who had existing coronary vascular disease, and there were other chronic diseases. 14% had respiratory problems, where there was asthma, COPD from smoking, previous bronchitis, etc. 6% had gastrointestinal, 4% had CNS, central nervous system, 4% had metabolic problems like diabetes and menopausal, and 4% had urinary tract problems. But we must also remember that apart from these chronic conditions, there are other possible risks like allergies, right? Chronic prescription medication, people that are on chronic prescription that can predispose to illness and injury on rights, and this acute medication, which we found that sometimes athletes always use non-steroidal anti-inflammatories before and after and during races, and that can predispose to like chronic, acute conditions like renal failure, etc. Next slide, please. Now, based on that assessment, based on that review, what would be the assessment, right? Right, it includes a full medical history, including your family history, social history, past injuries, etc. Family history is very important in the sense that sometimes people have coronary vascular disease that exists in the family, but they don't have the history, but the genetic trends are still there. Social history, whether it comes to smoking and drinking. And I think I'm speaking to the group that are not sedentary. I think I'm speaking to the group that are relatively active. So when it comes to the social history from an active environment, I think it's important that that certainly helps with longevity. And then when it comes to past history, past injuries, injuries in cycling, I'm not talking about the acute injuries where you get, it's an acute where you hit by a car and stuff like that. Sorry. I'm talking about chronic injuries where you got chronic back problems, chronic lower limb problems. I've been seeing this, right? Now, following the full history, you'll have a full clinical assessment, which includes the musculoskeletal screening, right? Now, following that, we pick up certain deficiencies, which can predispose to chronic problems coming down, and that's muscle, and which Johan spoke to earlier about fast twitch fibers and working in the gym. So sometimes I pick up patients that end up with tendinopathies and bursitis. Sorry, if you have a question, can you, if you can leave it till the end, and then we can address it there, or maybe we can, you can put it on the chat box. Johan, I don't know which one you do.
No, let's just leave the questions for last.
Okay. Okay. There's other assessments as well, which we find that it's very essential, is that visual assessment and dietary assessment as well. But coming to the important aspect of this thing is, and I always refer to this as the engine, the cardiovascular and respiratory system, which is where we find most of our problem or concerns, rather. We have resting and effort ECG and lung function tests. And lung function test is if indicated, but I think I would suggest certainly a resting and effort ECG. To pick up latent defects, but from the history, we can look at whether you have any problems related to the heart, because that's where the problem is. If we find from the history that we have any lung function problems, then we can actually certainly do a lung function test. Now, in this regard, there's the gold standard is the VO2 max testing. Now, not everybody may have the resources to go on, because this test is expensive, but it determines your maximum oxygen uptake and maximal effort, and determines also your lactate threshold. So how much you can do and how far you can do it, right? Now, if any, in all this assessment, if you have risk factors that are identified, then or I identify it, then I will refer you on to a cardiologist, specifically when it relates to cardiovascular problems, right? Next slide, please, sir. Over and above that testing, right, we have the fitness testing. Now, when it comes to this, there's a whole host of fitness testing that we do for you. It's your height, weight, your anthropometry, your functional movement screen, your skin folds, and then goes down to your power, etc. You know, I mean, we measure your anaerobic power and we measure your aerobic power. Now, this is over and above the testing that you do from a general perspective. Now, these are in the elite athlete group where we need to find, okay, can I push the envelope? Okay, so these are the tests that we know and know. And coaches like Johan will want to know what's your power to weight ratio, what's your weight, etc. I mean, that's very important for you to achieve at your level where you want to look. I mean, we're talking to a group of 50 plus. Okay, we also have the other group that's at the elite level that are striving and they're competing at international level. They always do this test. So I encourage you to also encourage, I will suggest that you would do these tests to help the coaches assist you in improving your you know, your functionality and your performance, etc. Next slide, thanks.
Even if maybe you can just jump in there. I think what we see is that a lot of all the athletes' mobility isn't there, and the explosive power is not there. So that test, you know, I've had many athletes that's gone through the test, identifies your weaknesses off the bike quite nicely, which is, as I said right in the beginning, we need to do more of that off the bike stuff to make sure that those fast twitch muscles don't deteriorate any further. So it's a very good test to do, just to kind of make sure we understand where we really are, not just how fast we go around the block.
No, I agree. Thank you for that, Johan. I mean, you as a coach would know your athletes. I mean, it's very important to have a baseline to see where you're at, and also based on certain parameters that we measure, we know what to increase or what to improve on, etc. And it doesn't have to be that you have to go to a gym, etc. You have your bike at home, you can put it on your ergometer there and you can do it, etc. You know, for you know, I want to give you an example, right? This is an example of what I've seen for in the last 4 weeks. Okay, I had a 64-year white male, very avid cyclist, cycling a lot. I mean, a professional cyclist, he called himself, right? He had a known history of hypertension and dyslipidemia. Dyslipidemia, where you have his cholesterols, etc., that were out of, you know, they were abnormal, and he was on treatment for this, right? However, he developed progressive shortness of breath in the preceding 6 months, you know, and but there's no clinical history of chest pain or pre-syncope. Syncope is where you feel like you want to faint or tired and you want to keel over. Any syncope, which is fainting, or even palpitations, which you can feel in your chest. I was referred to him, he was referred to me rather by a physiotherapist who I deal with. And he says to me, no, Kevin, you know what, I need you to assess this patient. So the clinical assessment was normal, by the way, blood pressure, etc. But then, you know, I did his ECG. I found that, okay, if you're looking at this ECG, there are a few abnormal kind of changes here. There's a normal, there's a few called ectopic beats. If you look at this, right? And this alerted me to the fact that, yeah, there may be something wrong with his heart. Okay. Now, these ectopic beats suggest that, you know, the heart is taking a bit of strain, but his preconditioning, meaning that his cycling career has held him in good stead. all right? However, next slide, please. Okay. Based on my assessment, I said, no, I need to assess him further. Okay. I referred him to a cardiologist, and his echo showed that he had a dilated heart, right? Now, a lot of the times you may think that, oh, dilated heart may be related to an athlete. An athlete's heart is dilated, right? However, there were multiple regional wall abnormalities, and his ejection fraction, which is the fact that his left ventricle pushes out 16.7% of his cardiac volume, where the normal is 52% as a lower normal. I mean, it shocked me, shocked me and shocked the athlete. We diagnosed him as what we call dilated cardiomyopathy. Now, we need to find out why he developed an abnormal heart. And so we did an angiogram, which was normal, right? Now, for example, and then we went further, and we found that on his blood test, he had high levels of SARS-CoV antibodies. Now, whether this was due to the vaccine or post-infection, because he didn't allude to any infections prior to that, but the fact is that his heart was compromised. Now, we know from the investigation that it was not due to coronary artery disease, but we must be aware of the fact that heart disease does not necessarily relate to coronary artery disease alone. It can be due to infections, it can be due to valvular disease, it can be due to other conditions. Thanks. Next slide, please.
Are you going to go past this?
Sorry?
You want to go past this slide?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Now, based on that, okay, you probably asked the question as to how much, or following an assessment, how much, how hard, how fast, and what intensity. Now, there's a thumbs up, right, which is a good thing, where it's 220 minus your age, and you time it by the percentage, right? But I think most of you or a lot of you use heart rate monitors, etc. Now, if you're looking at heart rate zones, if you're looking at the heart rate zones and how you can, 80 to 90% suggests that you're in the anaerobic zone. And that would be when you are like really sprinting to a finish, whether you're up a mountain, whether you climbing, etc. But your aerobic zone is 70 to 80% of your maximal. So you can calculate that and set that on your watches, by the way, right? That's the one way to do it. And if you happen to be in the weight control zone, you're 60 per 70, and then it's of your maximum. And then if you want to get the fat burning to help you with your weight control, then you 60%. And when you're in that zone, you can cycle for longer periods, and you'll burn off more fat, because you must remember that all your carbohydrates that you take in, if you don't burn off, right, get stored as fat. But if you go for a longer time, you burn off the carbohydrates, and they don't store as fat, and you can lose that fat. Okay, so I just put a different picture there to show you what your heart rates can do. That's with the monitoring. There's another way to monitoring, which Johan, change the slide, please, is what we call rate of perceived exertion. Now, this is where you can ascertain for yourself whether you have, how hard you are training. For example, this is called a Borg scale, by the way. If you have 3, it's a comfortable pace. You coming up to 4, comfortable with some effort. But if you're heading up to like 8, it's like it's where you're having to talk 2 or 3 words type of thing. You know what I'm saying? And then going up higher, you can't even talk. So you need to ascertain where you are in your intensity. So there's two ways to ascertain whether you are, what your intensity is. Next slide, please. Now, I don't want to get too technical, but when it comes to training and, you know, when it comes to the way you actually get better, right? There's a thing called heart rate variability. Now, it's a time between two beats, right, that fluctuates. Now, this can vary between 2 and 200 milliseconds. Now, that's, I don't want to get too technical, as I said. Now, it's generally undetectable without any specialized devices. But with this heart rate variability, you can, it can indicate that you have current or even future health problems that indicate heart conditions and even mental health problems. So there are parameters that you can measure, and you can use devices that can measure this. Next slide.
Kevin, I'll just share about the heart rate variability a bit later as well.
Yes, thank you. So just give you a visual of this, right? It's between one QRS complex. If you see the R and R interval, there's differentiation between 1 and 2, and this is autonomically generated. Now, if you can get this down, and this is where the elite athletes have this down to a fine art, you know, when it comes to starting a race, when it comes to during a race, etc., they can actually control this, controlling the autonomic system in the body. All right. Now, you need to, you can and develop this with certain kind of you know, parameters and stuff like, I mean, rest and recovery is one of the ways that you can do that, you know, in developing this kind of heart rate variability. Next slide. And this is where I come to recovery. Recovery is very important after an intense training session or after any long rides. I mean, most of the training effects, most, or if in fact all of the training effects happen in the recovery period. And the most important of this is sleep and nutrition, right? I mean, people think that taking supplements and, you know, getting injections and getting infusions and all of these things, sleep and nutrition are the paramount and about the best things for recovery, right? Minimal of 7 to 8 hours of sleep a day, proper nutrition, depending on what you want to do. If you want to lose weight, you cut back on your carbs to a certain extent and fat certainly, and then your protein intake. In this regard, I would, if depending on where you are, I would encourage you to maybe engage the support or the, you know, a nutritionist or a dietitian to help you with that, right? Then you come to other fancy modalities, like, I mean, you got massage, which is important sometimes, ice baths, compression garments. I mean, people at the elite level always use all these modalities, you know, so they would, after major races, go through all of these things. Next slide, please, sir.
You're done. Your slides are finished.
Okay. No, thank you, Johanna. I just hope that I covered a lot of ground. I mean, there's much more.
Okay, wait, I'm gonna. Are you guys seeing my presentation now, or not?
Yeah, I'm seeing it. It's okay. But I think I left a bit of a time for these questioning and answers. And
I just want to do a couple more, bit more. We spoke about. I just want to. Can you guys see my presentation now, Kevin?
Yes, I can.
I just want to. You know, Kevin spoke to you about the QRS score and looking at those kind of things. That's important. Heart rate variability is something that is free. You go onto your mobile device and you search one of these devices. There's heart rate variability for training, which I use quite a lot, and then Elite HIV was one of the better ones. But there's a lot of them out there, and on this device, actually, you put your finger on the camera, and it's got a very fancy algorithm. and it will basically measure that heart rate variability as Kevin explained earlier. And this is probably one of the best tools you can have to decide whether you must back off. Because if that variability goes to a yellow over 3 or 4 days or red, you know the body is fighting something. Even if you still feel good, this is the best time to back off until the variability comes back to normal. So for midlife cyclists, I think heart rate variability is definitely one of the most powerful tools we've got to see, when we can go or when we need to rest.
Sorry, Johan, can I
Yes, sir.
just a quick question on that? So our normal Garmin devices and heart rate monitors and stuff, if you look at it from a Training Peaks perspective, you won't pick it up.
I do. So Garmin doesn't use heart rate variability. They've got a different algorithm. Your Apple Watch uses heart rate variability, but it collects too much data. So an Apple, I've got a whole day's worth of data, and it doesn't create a good trend. So the idea would be you would have say HRV for training on your phone, and you will do that 1 minute measurement every morning when you wake up at the same time of the day. So it creates a better trend analysis in terms of what your current status is. Did I answer your question, Chart?
Yeah, Chart, can I just add to what Johannes said, is that, sorry, as much as most of the Garmins who are very good devices, unfortunately don't measure heart rate variability. I think you should download the app that Johannes suggested, and that can monitor it better, because that's a predictor. That's a predictor, sir, of even future problems. So we monitor that in all athletes, and as I said, it's an autonomic kind of response of your body. I hope that answers your question, sir.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so it's an offline test. It's yes, not sir.
It actually, some of these systems does speak through to Training Peaks. For example, if you use HRV for training, that links through to Training Peaks, and I actually can see the data on my side under the metrics in Training Peaks as well. But it's a trend analysis. People get a bit panicky if they see one red day and they think life's going to come to an end. It is about building up data over time, because each of our HRV values are different. I mean, mine is quite low, and I always very stressed out when my friend's HRV is higher or better, looks better than mine. But each of us are different, so we need to kind of build this profile around who we are. And then if we then trust the system, I can guarantee you that it will go a long way to help you manage your risk. I've got some of my colleagues that doesn't even use Training Peaks. They only use HRV to do all the coaching on. So if they see that thing goes red, they back off. If they see it goes green, they go harder. And that's how they do the training. So HRV for training specifically for us, over 50s are definitely, or any of the HRV measurement tools, definitely something to consider. Okay, so
we got a question on here. What heart rate zone should over 50s focus on for the majority of their training? And what's the maximum time?
I'm going to get you to just now.
Okay, cool. All right. Thank you.
So this is just how to do it better if you're older than 50. Replace heart rates on the bike with focus resistance training in the gym. This is one of the best things we can do. Instead of doing hill work twice a week, go 1 day hills, 1 day gym, because we need the resistance training. I've just a client of mine just joined me, and they do rucking. I've never heard of this in my life until I understood what it was. They go walking in the mountains or around the neighborhood off-road with a weighted backpack, 10% of their body weight. So I mean, that kind of resistance training is definitely the stuff that we need to do more of as we get older. And then if you feel good, don't go harder, go longer. Okay, if you feel like you are the champion today of your group ride, just tell them we're going to go for 2 laps instead of trying to beat in the first lap. This is an important slide. If I look at the blue bars, represent elite athletes. Okay, so the first the one on the left represents heart rate zone 2, or which is that aerobic capacity building zone. The middle bar is on the threshold, and the right-hand side bar is where you go anaerobic. So the blue is the time distribution for an elite athlete. The yellow or the orange is the time distribution that I pick up from my midlife cyclist. And you will see there, the relationship is totally wrong. We do not do this stuff the same way as an elite cyclist would do it. As elite cyclists will spend 14 hours of a 20-hour week riding zone 2, which is aerobic capacity building zone, where we as a midlife cyclist, because we're a bit strapped for time, we think we need to go out there and we need to go harder. So, you know, we as 50-year-old plus just look at Peter Sagan and part of, you know, what TJ, I can't remember his pronounce his surname, but all these new amazing riders, and we trying to imitate what they're doing, but we do not have the same time as they have, and we're not 20 years old, so we need to do stuff a bit differently. So the question that Kevin that you saw there in the chat, midlife cyclists need to spend a large majority of their time in the aerobic heart rate zone, which is, and those that know me, I get quite stuck on this thing called zone 2, which is about up to about 85% of your threshold heart rate zone, and I think about 70% of your maximum heart rate zone, if I remember Kevin's slide correctly. And
yeah,
then
just on that, just to answer the question there, and you can use it as a thumbs up. You know, I mean, they use that 220 minus your age times 80%, 85%. You know, that's the, you know, from the slide that I put up. Yeah.
So what I'll do is after the presentation, just send, well, we're recording this presentation, so you'll be able to see Kevin's slides in terms of the, you know, the ratios for heart rate as well. But I think, again, I'm emphasizing endurance riding is important, and then replace some of these top end, high intensity stuff with some stuff in the gym. Something that, you know, Kevin touched on getting better sleep. Reduce alcohol and sugar. And the funny thing is that we all know these things are bad, but the older we get, and I'm a guilty guy as well, your alcohol intake takes, you know, goes up, and the body is not so robust to take all these foreign things out of our bodies anymore. So I would suggest, if you want to do a very long ride, like the double Maluti coming up this weekend, you know, you should have made last night of drinking a glass of wine. Just kind of cut it out totally, because it will definitely stand you in good stead if you do not take any alcohol. Monitor vitamin D levels. That's very, very important. We don't see that. You know, you see as we get older, the vitamin D can drop a bit, and so that's important to take. You know, I take a vitamin D supplement every day. It's just a little chewable tablet. And then, as Kevin said, do not compromise on stress or on recovery ever. It is like the most important thing you can do. Angie, have you got a question? Okay, so the conclusion is, you know, I think the picture Kevin and we create around the heart is not pretty, but the benefits of exercise far outweigh the risk as we get older. So I really want to encourage you guys, you know, let's all keep on doing what we love to do, but we're not 25 anymore, so we need to plan a bit better. You know, it's really not my advice to just keep on going hard every single morning. We need to make sure recovery is good. We need to make, you know, if you've got an HIV measurement device, I think it'll be fantastic to tell you when to back off or not. And going harder on a bike all the time is not a solution for long, nappy cycling life. Guys, that's my yes, Charles.
Two very quick questions baffles my mind now, given what I've done up till now. The one is, in one of the first slides you mentioned, you know, the ideal thing, not more than 5 hours, 2 to 5 hours and less if you go hard. That's the one question. The other thing is, I've always been under the impression it's zone 2 and even zone 3, which is, let's say, up to the mid 150s, is aerobic. And then you start to go into anaerobic state. Now, Kevin's one slide, if you look at it, actually shows that zone 3 is anaerobic. So I had those things wrong because Training Peaks and Garmin and so on tells me wrong.
Let me explain. There's two lactic threshold points. The one is called LT1, and the right heart rate zone to train around is LT1. Then there's LT2. Beyond LT2 is anaerobic. Zone 3 falls into the middle of these two things. So it's kind of it straddles both aerobic and anaerobic training. You do start using a lot of carbohydrates as fuel when you go into zone 3. It creates a lot of fatigue, and the benefit is definitely not what you know. I always say to people, when you ride zone 3, you get back home and you feel tired and you think to yourself, shucks, that was an amazing ride. But all you've done is you've made yourself tired. The adaptations in your body in terms of what the benefits of riding in the correct zone around LT1 far outweighs the feeling of being tired when you get off the bike.
So my ratio of zone 2 to zone 3 being 2 to 1, but I feel, okay, right, I've listened to you, is not necessarily a good thing.
Not a good thing. You need to go 80% zone 2 and 20% zone 4. If you can stay away from zone 3, that's the ultimate.
Chad, just can I come in there, sir? Okay. I always use the analogy of a car. It's a fuel in a tank type of thing. I mean, that's what fuels you for whichever zone that you think that you're going to be training in. And it all depends on nutrition and whatever you're using, because and also it depends on your muscle capacity, right? Because it's important, and you'll know from your body composition or your body feeling, right, whether I can. And the other thing is that it's also about your heart rate. You're absolutely right when it comes to monitoring your heart rate in the zones, and depending on what age you are, you got to set your watch to that kind of a zone, and say to yourself, okay, when it bleeps that, I mean, what's the problem? Is it my muscle capacity? Is it my fuel? Is it my, this type of thing? So I think you got to be very careful when you are looking on a long ride or a hard ride. And I go back to the analogy of a car. You got to put the fuel in the tank, sir. I hope that explains things.
Also, all the stuff I've read is for, as we get older, that amount of super hard rides really put too high a stress on our heart muscle. So we can actually do a bit less anaerobic stuff on the bike, do some resistance training off the bike. And that's why I say replace one of those hill climb sessions with a gym session. Your body's going to be much more balanced. And the funny thing is, I mean, I can show you some examples of guys over 50 who focus on riding in that lactic zone, LT1 zone, or heart rate zone 2, so much that this gentleman, there was a very large race in the crew a couple of weeks back, a 180k race. He barely came out of zone 2, and he was 8th overall. He's 52. He was 8th overall, not in the midlife cyclist group, overall. Because if you develop that energy system so good, you start generating a lot more power whilst your body is not stressed. The heart just ticks over. And that's the ideal for any one of us wanting to do these long events. We need to get the body to generate a lot of power without extra stress.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, Johan. I mean, to train that zone specifically, I mean, unfortunately, well, I don't know where most of your riders come from, but we at sea level are at a disadvantage. I mean, if you're looking at that training high, living low, that whole sort of controversy. I mean, we have a high altitude room at Prime in Durban at Moses Mabhida, where we actually use a lot of, or we train athletes to train at high altitude if they're happening to go and competing at high altitude, like Johannesburg and up there. And it certainly has helped. Now, we're not going to ask them to go to sleep at high altitude tents, etc., because this is not the group we're talking to. I mean, some of the elite athletes even go to that extent to go and develop that anaerobic capacity and lactate threshold, where they can bring it up much higher, where the lactate threshold is much higher, where they actually, don't end up in fatigue, etc. So just to inform the audience that, yeah, we have a high altitude room, and you can use that. And Johan, I mean, it's at your disposal, sir, if you want to use some of your athletes.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Kevin. Kevin, I've got a question in the chat from Andrew. He asked, why vitamin D and not C? Do you want to answer that question?
Well, vitamin D basically it just helps bone with your calcium. I mean, not C. C is a different connotation, but vitamin D is specifically because your bones are harder. I mean, you're getting in age, depending on your dairy intake, depending on your, and I don't suppose that cyclists don't have any sun exposure, but I mean, sometimes vitamin D, depending on your lifestyle, by the way, if you are bound, I mean, working in an indoor, etc., your vitamin D can be low, and that in itself can impact on your bone health, specifically. It's vitamin D and calcium, not vitamin C. Vitamin C will help you generally with your immune system, with all of that. Yeah,
and we get a lot of the vitamin C through a normal diet in any case, but vitamin D, the diet doesn't give enough of that. We need to get outdoors to get that. So I know many people listening to this discussion, they are going out training at, when it's still dark, and then they go back into an office. So vitamin D definitely helps with that.
And you can easily test it, by the way. I mean, just do a vitamin D and take a supplement. It helps you because, as I say, it'll certainly help with bone growth, bone stability. Yeah.
I've got another question about iron intake. Kevin, I'm going to give this a bash, and then you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. Iron, funny thing is, people think we need to take iron to stop cramping. But the magnesium in the system allows your body to absorb nutrients better. In itself, it doesn't do a lot. It helps the absorption of the nutrients very, very well. So in a normal diet, if you are eating a bit of meat and stuff, you're going to get quite a bit of iron in already. Iron is definitely a bit of a bigger issue for ladies, but I don't think men has got such a big issue on iron. I can tell you, I mean, people normally talk to me about iron because they cramp. And cramping is one of those things that there's no scientific explanation for it, but I can tell you out of personal experience, if you reduce the alcohol intake a week before a race, the chance of you cramping is way less. You don't have to kind of add iron on top of that to kind of help the iron intake or the cramping so much. Kevin, you want to add on to that?
Yeah. I certainly agree with you that the problem with iron deficiency is certainly more common among women because of the menstruation. However, it's important to understand, or maybe testing the iron, because sometimes you can have a good ferritin level, which is your stored iron, but you don't have a good serum iron because your transferrin is low, which means that it doesn't convert into serum iron. Yeah. Now, iron has an impact on your hemoglobin and your hematocrit, which is your red cells. And that translates into endurance and oxygen carrying capacity. So if you are fatigued, if you feel that your hair is falling, if you feel that your nails are brittle, in particular amongst females, I would encourage them to do a full iron profile and go on to a supplement, because that will certainly help the overall fatigue and etc. So it's one of the things is that vitamin C certainly helps the absorption of iron from the body, right? When you ingest it. So, I mean, taking vitamin C with iron will certainly help you. I hope that answers it.
Andrew says it's too late. His hair is already fallen out, so he must have taken no iron when he was younger. I just want to add on to what Kevin said. One of my clients is an older guy. I think he's having his 80th 80th birthday next month, or next month. They did a full medical with him the other day, and they found that his iron was too high. So that in itself is also very dangerous. So I think as we get older, the best is don't just go into this scheme and buy supplements. Understand what is our profile, get a proper blood test done, and supplement correctly. Don't just buy the latest fad or go with the latest idea that, you know, this is the next good thing that's going to make me ride faster.
You know, just on that iron being too high, sometimes when you can have an inflammatory condition in your body, whether it's the flu, whether it's gastro something, it can push up the iron, particularly the ferritin, right? And that can tell you that it's not that your serum iron is high, because that hemochromatosis is what the diagnosis is when it comes to that. It's called hemochromatosis. But we need to look at what the hematocrit is, and then if the hematocrit is above 50, then you need to have some sort of venesection, etc., where it can be dangerous. So you got to just investigate that and see why the iron is high. And if it is high, you need to ascertain whether it's due to an inflammatory condition and not any other pathological conditions.
Kevin, thank you. Guys, we've gone over the time that I've allocated. Is there anyone else with a question before we wrap it up?
I see Andrew said that his hair's gone too late.
Yeah.
Kevin, just a question.
Yes, sir.
With me, I've always just got on a bike and just chased everything and anything that moves. And I've been quite successful in I've specialized in the track. But, you know, I felt that was good for me. Now, moving forward, being 63, is that the way I should carry on? Because I don't really use any electronic devices or heart rate monitors and stuff.
So what's your question, sir?
Well, if I carry on along the same route, could that be quite detrimental to me moving forward?
I mean, as I said in my talk, I mean, do you have any pre-existing conditions? Do you have you had, who's your doctor? Does he have any concerns about you? Have you had recent blood tests? You know, these are the things when you get on in age, you have to just keep a check on, you know. And if all of that is in check, you know, I mean, as I said in my initial slides, there's red flags. And when red flags come up, I think it is it's prudent for you to maybe just go to your doctor and say, look, I'm this kind of guy, put me on a treadmill, do my blood test, I'm good to go. I'm not saying that you need to stop doing this thing. Unfortunately, the example I gave today is that we had to tailor off that person's thing. And the only thing that held him in good stead, in my opinion, was his pre-existing or his preconditioning, by the way. Otherwise, you would have succumbed to this thing a long time ago. So what I'm saying to you is that look at your family history, look at your current history, look at your current bloods, and take it from there, sir.
I can just add on that for track cyclists, we get older, we definitely have to spend some time in the gym, because I see it when I go down to the track. Those our fast twitch muscles are deteriorating. We need to do proper resistance training to get it going. So just going on a track bike alone, well, you know, it's okay. But if you want to maximize your performance as we get older, you know, we need to do a bit of stuff off the bike as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm saying a lot of people are saying thank you, and they're leaving us. So last couple of minutes for someone for questions. Okay, so then I'm going to call it a wrap. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. It was really good doing this. I can just tell you we're going to do some follow-ups on this. We're going to talk about the best strength and conditioning for midlife cyclists in the future. We're also going to talk about nutrition. So yeah, just keep your eyes peeled to our social media feeds. We will give you more information as we go.
Thank you, Johan, and thank you for inviting me to this.